Chapter 5, The Proper Order of Things. Yes, let's do it proper like Magnus, you and me. Sip of tea, of course. I freaking knew it was going to be tea. Magnus took a sip of tea as Reuben and I hesitantly moved towards the sofa. Does this not imply that he already had the tea made? I was just like, please have a seat. His face was calm, almost amused by our wariness. But that smile of his felt like a knife laid at my throat. I did not trust him. He set the teacup down again with a soft clink, giving Reuben an expectant look. He looked for all the world like he belonged there, though he very much did not. Reuben glared at him, then cut his eyes towards the kitchen.
At least you didn't leave a mess, I suppose. He did. I cleaned it up.
Ari, this is why you're one of the good ones.
Must you behave this way in front of guests, Ari? I swear you have no manners. Didn't I raise you better than this?
I believe you and I are the guests. Or technically intruders. And you had no involvement in raising me, I hope you realize.
Ari's having zero of it. Magnus gave him a poisonous look that Ari returned by raising an eyebrow. For a moment, neither spoke, but Magnus eventually let out a sigh and turned back to us.
Please ignore him. He has the social skills of a potato due to his extremely questionable upbringing.
Kind of rich coming from you, but okay. Of a potato. That seems to be a common affliction for Endgame agents, if I'm going off the ones I've met so far. For a split second, Magnus stared at me in surprise before he let out a short bark of laughter. There was almost a slight shift in his demeanor after that, a softening of that sharp smile. Odd.
It is at that, I'm afraid.
Well, as you said, it's obviously something about how they're raised.
Yes, that does seem to be the case for us all, doesn't it?
At least they didn't appear to have the intention of grabbing me and teleporting away. Ari would obviously have attempted it already. For the time being, I perched on the edge of a chair, ready to dive out of the way if I had to. Reuben followed and leaned against the side of the same chair, not moving from my side. I was grateful for his presence.
Now, you don't have to look so anxious. I've said I just want to talk.
The last time I met some of your agents, they seemed pretty opposed to talking, so I hope you'll understand my reluctance to believe you.
We were following orders.
I'm aware that's probably the case, but from my perspective it doesn't change much. You realize I thought I was being abducted? I was terrified for my life. And all it would have taken was someone saying, "We're with Endgame," to at least give me some level of comfort that I wasn't about to be horribly murdered.
We were not permitted to tell you until...
I don't care what your orders were! Your orders were wrong!
Unfortunately, our goal was to take you without making our affiliation known. I realize that doesn't undo the experience you had, but given how easy it is to monitor situations from afar, this required that we not mention our affiliation at all until we were certain we were in a secure location. Not even to you. Those were the standing orders regarding your retrieval. Normally, throwing little Kale under a bus is quite entertaining, but in this case he was doing as told.
But why? Why was there such a stupid order in the first place? I know the public statement, but I also know full well you aren't snatching children off the streets without a word. Why would you do it to me?
I suppose an explanation of sorts is warranted after all, though it isn't why we're here. To put in the shortest possible terms, there were concerns for, by and large, the safety of your family, just as we've stated to the public already. I hope you realize that by the time Endgame learned of your existence, Morgan, may I call you Morgan?
Hell no! Whatever, man. You'll call me Morgan whether I say yes or no, so I don't care. I tried to not just stare in disbelief at this man. How he could act like he had stopped by for afternoon tea was baffling. I don't know how to say this, but I don't care what you call me.
Oh? How congenial. I admit I've been looking forward to the chance of getting to know you a bit better, Morgan.
Really?
It might surprise you to learn I see us as somewhat similar. Despite that I was born into Endgame and you spent your life outside it, we both fit into a very small subset of an already tiny community. And our skills and potentials set us atop that community in a way that can be isolating. Far more, I think, than you have learned in your short time in the spotlight.
Oh? So he wasn't happy being an Esper either? Is that what he was getting at? I struggled to sympathize with his putting us in the same basket, though perhaps that was narrow-minded of me. It was true my life had been upended and that he'd had a hand in it. But then he never got a chance at a normal life from the start, did he? Maybe that was why he acted like that. It was still irritating, though.
I believe we can help each other, Morgan. And I don't believe that being acquainted with me will be a bad thing.
We were getting sidetracked here, weren't we? You were explaining to me why my retrieval looked a lot like a kidnapping, weren't you, Mr. Ulrich?
Oh, please, you can call me Magnus. I don't even know who Mr. Ulrich is.
That is such a good throwaway line. Instead of the, please call me blah blah blah, Mr. So-and-so is my father, he's like, I don't have a dad, technically. I mean, I do, but I don't, because I'm a clone. That is so good. I really love that.
I apologize for distracting myself. What was I saying?
You were discussing how by the time we learned of Morgan's existence, other factions were already closing in.
Yes, exactly. You see, I have difficulty locating F-class espers such as yourself, Morgan. A situation compounded by your rank, as queens are already rather good at hiding.
I wasn't trying to hide, I hope you realize. Not technically. I mean, sort of technically. Not in the way he was getting at, anyway.
No, but it's something of a defense mechanism, you see. Most queen ranks blend in with the non-espers around them, mimicking their psi on pure instinct. Our previous queen rank did much the same thing. It's something we're quite familiar with when it comes to queen ranks.
If queens are so difficult to find, how did other factions find me first? Or is it just you who struggles to locate them?
That sounds almost like an intentional jab, but I'll let it pass for now. The truth is, the king rank esper in Crimson appears to have a knack for locating F-class espers. Perhaps because he, too, is an F-class. The mechanic isn't something I understand. However, we watch his movements closely, as I'm sure you can imagine. When they began to move in on you, it alerted me to your existence. Initially, we weren't sure what they were planning. It was rather late that we realized the potential queen rank had been located. Once we verified that you were indeed their target, we had only a small window to act.
So this was all Crimson's fault. That's what he was getting at. Of course, that had been their public statement, but they'd left out all these details. I wondered how much of it was true. Magnus had gone quite serious compared to before. It was possible he was lying, but I don't know. It felt like it might actually be the truth.
Unfortunately, by that point, Crimson was not the only one interested in you. We aren't the only group that watches Oberon.
Oberon?
Noir was on your trail by that point as well, and another faction we know only as the Host. And I fear you quickly attracted the attention of others as well. Queen ranks are so rare, you see, and you presented a unique opportunity. An adult queen rank with all the potential of a normal queen, yet none of the skills to protect yourself. A valuable prize for all sorts of shady groups, wouldn't you say?
Including Endgame, of course.
Dang, nice one, Reuben.
Oh my, are you suggesting Endgame is shady?
Are you suggesting Endgame isn't?
Not at all.
Most of what Magnus is taking his time to explain is what Endgame has already shared about our motivations. Our goal was to apprehend you in a way that would point the finger to a group others would assume would be unmoved by any attempts to harm your family. Had others known it was Endgame that had taken you, we would have been required to relocate your family and likely alter their identities for their protection. We wish to avoid such a big upset for your entire family.
If you weren't afraid of looking like kidnappers, you could have just taken me in the middle of the night. Wouldn't that have been easier?
We couldn't have ourselves looking too efficient, could we? Nothing would scream Endgame's involvement louder than you simply vanishing from sight.
Are you suggesting you made a show of it, then bungled it in order to look less adept?
Well, I wouldn't say it quite like that. We wanted to look less efficient than we could have, in order to have Crimson, Noir, and the others all fighting amongst themselves over who got to you first. But Ari and Caleb bungled it entirely on their own.
Ari's like, really?
The car explosion was not in their orders. Little Ari came up with that on his own.
We were being tracked and pursued faster than we anticipated. It was necessary to improvise.
Yes, yes. I managed to somehow get through your exceptionally dry mission report. I'm aware of what happened. Morgan, I'm sure that from your perspective we did look like mere kidnappers. But I hope you can at least understand that if we did not move quickly, you could have ended up in the hands of people far more unsavory than Endgame. And we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Listen, I'm angry about the aspect of you attempting to force me to join your organization. But I need you to know that my biggest problem is how you approached it. I can somewhat understand the need for secrecy and why you wanted to conceal your identities, though the ins and outs of Esper dramatics might be somewhat beyond me. But terrorizing someone like that, whether they're a rogue Esper or not, is unacceptable. You're Endgame, for crying out loud! Am I supposed to really buy you couldn't find some way to inform me what the hell was going on?
And if we had done so, you would have come quietly, wouldn't you? If Ari had politely informed you that he was with Endgame and you were to come obediently, you would have done that. Because that's what happens to rogue Espers, isn't it?
Something about the way his tone shifted gave me a pause. I mean, Reuben and I had discussed this already too, but the way Magnus said it was odd.
And if that had happened, you would be at our headquarters right now, beginning your training, becoming one of us, a dutiful little agent. And you never would have questioned whether you had a choice, because we are so adept at ensuring no one believes they do.
Magnus?
Isn't it interesting, though? By not telling you the truth, we caused you to fight against that destiny, didn't we? You fled Ari and Caleb. You fled Jack Visser. And now you're sitting before me, armed with knowledge and a chance, a small one, but a chance to remain outside our illustrious grasp.
Why was he saying that like he was glad that was the case? Oh, he's thrilled, girl. He's thrilled. Maybe I was misreading him?
You've been up to some interesting things since you eluded us, haven't you, Morgan? An Esper consultant. How very interesting. Is your goal to gain support from the Triad with the hope they'll fight any attempts to force your recruitment? To prove that you're not dangerous, but rather valuable? Or is it to call into question Esper policy, or throw into relief the need for clearer direction on the fate of adult Espers? Win over public opinion with your efforts.
What are you...
Magnus held up a hand, cutting him off.
Then let me tell you something. Endgame has been in an uproar over you for days, and there's been a lot of internal debate regarding what to do about it. Our council has been arguing non-stop.
And? Are you here to tell me their decision in person?
Hardly. They're unaware of this little excursion and would most certainly not approve of what I intend to do. In fact, they would be quite annoyed with me were they to discover I came to speak with you.
Then why did you?
I enjoy antagonizing them for one. But more importantly, as I said before, I believe we can help one another. I have no intention of taking you anywhere against your will. I won't force you into Endgame, or smear your reputation like the council wants.
They want to what?
Magnus, I don't believe it was necessary to share that information.
Ari, let him cook.
Why not? It's her reputation at stake. Isn't it fair that she knows what's being plotted behind her back?
I don't think...
I don't care. You see, Morgan, our dear council just think it was a monumental shame you elected not to register yourself. It was, of course, your legal responsibility, which puts you in the unfortunate and shameful situation of being non-compliant in a nation that values compliance a great deal.
Hard to register yourself when you don't know you're an Esper.
Oh, please. We both know she was well aware she is an Esper. Perhaps you were unaware of your rank, Morgan, but it defies belief that you never had a single instance of unconscious use of Psi. You knew, and we know you did. Thus they're debating weaponizing that against you. New Albion would never encourage non-compliance. Why, it would be the downfall of civilized society. In short, by overstating the potential harm caused by this, by insinuating something more sinister was at play, by using other personal information about you, such as a certain incident from primary school. They do expect they can make a case against and force New Albion's hand. You will come to Corsolaris for training, and when we elect to keep you there, New Albion will support us.
So rather than simply insist on training, they were going to attempt to make me seem dangerous. How can they just... That's just... Who is this council anyway? I thought you were in charge.
That isn't entirely accurate, I'm afraid. I am the highest ranking active agent, true. It was, however, the council that insisted on our retrieval strategy, at the behest of a group of bishops who advised that certain futures ahead of you were undesirable. Agents follow my orders, yes, but my orders are meted out by the council, of which I am a sadly outnumbered member. I can see you're confused. I fear I don't quite have time to delve into all of Endgame's internal struggles, or my long history with them. You'd have to play my route for that. I will say that of the possible outcomes of your situation, you chose one of the least likely, something I find very interesting.
What do you want from me, Magnus? Why are you really here?
Though it's a little outside my usual, allow me to be forthright. Endgame needs to change. It's rotting from the inside out, and has been for decades. My understanding is that Detective Kellner also believes organizations are doomed to such a fate when they've been around long enough.
How do you...
Magnus waved a hand as if the answer was obvious.
Please, don't pretend it's difficult to find out what you do in your spare time. Your footprints across the net are easily tracked for someone like me. But perhaps it will surprise you to know I agree with you. And like you, I'm interested in changing the current policies regarding espers throughout the Triad. Because outside change will force inside change.
If Endgame needs reforms, then why?
Because I am outnumbered, Morgan. I have no support, and the kind of changes we need requires support. Or a catalyst. I thought that perhaps once you were inside, you could be the sort of catalyst that could shake Endgame to the core. Perhaps even break it, uproot the council, and force a rebuild.
That does happen in one universe. What? Wasn't that a little extreme?
But I have come to believe you can do the same from the outside. The council bends easily to outside pressure in their attempts to maintain their precious balance. Having you on the inside might be useful, but having you out here can serve a similar purpose.
What in the world was this man saying? He wanted me to change Endgame from the start?
I can see it surprises you to know that not all of us agree with the stranglehold Endgame has on the Esper community.
Sure as hell surprises me.
Habits are a frightening thing, aren't they? Society gets used to a certain flow and ceases to question it after time. But Endgame's flaws are increasingly apparent to those of us inside it. To those of us born into it, or those who have been there most of our lives and still have the freedom of thought to question it. However, changing the direction of an organization like this is difficult, sometimes impossible for those same people. Especially without a large shakeup, something to shatter the illusion and wake up others to the problems.
And that's what you want me to do?
It's what I want to help you to do.
I glanced at Ari, who, for the first time, seemed uncomfortable with this conversation. He looked away when our eyes met, a frown crossing his face. So you're hoping I can manage to convince your council they don't need every single Esper to join Endgame?
No, nothing will convince the council of that. I want you to convince everyone else. Endgame doesn't create laws and policy, Morgan. We manipulate them, but ultimately we do not wade into the politics. The things you're hoping to achieve by making us stand out here, by making a statement about possibility, by drawing attention to the painful restraints Espers live with. I want you to succeed. I can't help as much as I'd like, but I can offer you time. Though my ability to do even that is limited.
Offer me time? You mean holding off the council for a while, I assume? How?
Delaying decisions, for one. I'm quite good at it, actually. You'd be surprised at how annoying I can be.
I don't think that would surprise me.
How mean.
How exactly are you going to delay the council?
I have my methods. Among others, I've put forth a proposal for a hybrid position. A sort of Esper Reserve Corps. Something that would allow people to live outside and be called up only if we need them.
Esper Reserves?
There would also be a consultant tier, something similar to what you're doing now, but that would require people in your position to report back to us. And proposals for outsourcing training. And much more. Some of it far beyond a realistic ability to implement. But implementation isn't the point. I doubt we can make much, if any, of it work, but it's meant to present a seemingly reasonable compromise, if you will. Unfortunately, I tend to draft proposals very slowly, and I make so many mistakes they need to be edited multiple times. I'm quite forgetful as well. I have a bad habit of forgetting meetings and misplacing things, which slows things down even more. And I'm also a very busy man, so things like this can take weeks to draft, if not months. Then they must be adjusted, voted on, ratified, or rejected. It's a lengthy process. And of course, if these proposals were to leak, the council could hardly reject them outright. And then we would have to discuss it with the outside as well. It's always nice to get outside points of view, after all. There would be so many calls and meetings. Bureaucracy always takes so very long.
Huh. So his goal was to use the process as a way to make them hold off on immediate action, then apparently slow things down even more by being inefficient. All to give me time to prove myself out here, to prove I didn't need training, that ranked espers weren't a danger.
One of our most prominent bishops has agreed to help by insisting it's not the right time to press the issue as well.
Oh, really? Shout out my girl. Man, I've forgotten her name. Oh. Man, Vaughn's sister, what was Veronica? Is that what her name was? Another V, but she also had like a Greek name. But anyway, shout out you.
The council puts great stock in her advice, and for the time being, has agreed to wait.
And you came all the way here just to tell me this.
I thought it might be helpful for you to know what's going on behind the scenes rather than be left in the dark. Everyone works better in the light, don't you think? Without feeling like you're waiting for things to fall apart.
This was unexpected. A possible ally on the inside of an organization I had very much viewed as an adversary. This could change things. Unless it was some elaborate trick, though I couldn't see the point of it if it was.
I do believe you are in a position to take a stand, but it will be a difficult journey, and you won't succeed on your own. My ability to help you will increase the more successful you are out here. That's why I wish to see you make a point the major powers on this side cannot ignore.
I mean, we were planning to do that anyway, and this just increases our chances of success, so I'm game. Well, that was my intent all along. I just assumed you were part of the group I needed to make a point to.
Then I'm pleased to say that I'm not. I don't want to see you in Endgame, Morgan. Perhaps you find that difficult to understand, but now that there's an opportunity to keep you away from the organization and to effect change from a safe distance, I believe it's for the best. It's time our council learn they cannot always get what they want. These are, after all, lives we are dealing with, not pieces to be used in a power play, no matter how noble the commas.
It's still strange to hear you say that, but I suppose there's no reason for you to come here and craft an elaborate lie like this. I can't work out what the purpose of that would be. Can I ask one thing, though?
My time is very limited, but I'll try to answer, as long as it's just one thing.
The changes you want to see in Endgame. How widespread is the mentality that change is needed? I mean, Ari's been standing here the whole time listening in. Is he in agreement with all this?
Ari is one of our most dutiful agents. He joined Endgame at the tender age of 3 as his abilities awakened rather early. He is, of course, an F-class such as yourself.
I don't believe my childhood is under discussion, Magnus.
Perhaps not. However, did you think you're here now just because you're an effective mode of transportation?
Ooh, dang. I mean, there's a reason Caleb's not here.
Morgan, there are other agents who believe much as I do. It might surprise you to learn that Caleb Jung is one of them. Agents who are torn between Endgame's purpose and the way it exercises its power are not uncommon. And there are also agents like Ari, who haven't yet learned to question it. But I think it's time they learn to do so. The mentality that Endgame needs to change is growing. But those of us hurt most by the organization are certainly the ones who feel most strongly this way. I'll leave it at that.
Hurt by the organization. It was almost like the only two classes of agents were those indoctrinated since a young age, or those Endgame had somehow harmed. That flew in the face of everything I thought about Endgame. Everything most people thought about them. But in this, I thought Magnus was most definitely not lying. And that was sad.
Unfortunately, it looks like my time is wrapping up. There's no need to answer every question in a day. I'm certain we'll be in touch. However, a few more points. First, I suspect you would be best served staying where you are for the time being. I know there's been discussion about moving you to a residence of your own.
Yo, Magnus, you a Reuben Morgan shipper over here?
The council are not above making decisions without telling me, and we do have groups that specialize in moving in the shadows to do things the public might find questionable.
Oh yeah, the Furies. We've met. Not eager to run into them again.
They'll be more hesitant to mobilize them against you if you're here. They won't want to involve a civilian like Detective Kellner, particularly since that will also rile up Utpal. With you here, it's much more difficult to cover up your disappearance, since it would inevitably involve tangling with a special investigator. Second, you should be able to contact your family freely going forward. I'm aware you've spoken to them on a restricted channel. That won't be necessary any longer. But I recommend you not discuss meeting me when you do. You never know who might be listening. And finally, I will be giving you unofficial access to our long-distance Sci training courses. You may find them useful.
I was wondering, I'm like, am I gonna have like secret training so that I can like learn to be awesome, but the council doesn't know why she's becoming awesome? Because that would be very helpful.
Like it or not, learning to use Sci will benefit you.
Somehow it feels like I need to get used to the term unofficial.
It's remarkable how much unofficial business happens on this planet. We certainly like to think only half the world is shrouded in shadow. But there are just as many on this side of the planet. And the light always throws them into much sharper relief.
I suppose it's always like that. On this world or any other.
Unfortunately, I suspect you may be right.
But I agree with you. The training courses will be helpful.
They're geared toward infantry, all-rounders with weak Sci, and their purpose is to teach control over practical application. You have so much more potential, but we don't have material geared toward training someone like you. Not yet. So this will have to suffice. And Morgan, you must think bigger than finding the culprits of simple crimes. There are worse things happening on this planet, and shining a light on those is what will really make people sit up and take notice.
He's right about that. What does...
Do your best, Morgan. Many people are watching.
He stood as he spoke, giving me a surprisingly gentle smile before he turned to Ari.
Good luck. Ari, we're leaving. Charisse is on her way to my office after I ignored multiple internal messages. We have 2 minutes to reach the tower. Did you notify the others?
I informed your guard that you appear to be wrapping up, yes.
You'll need to make 2 trips. I must return immediately.
Understood.
Magnus held his hand out to me, smiling again. I stood and took it, more to be polite than anything. My head was still reeling from our discussion, and the fact he'd even come. That he was... on my side? Sort of? It was a lot. Magnus stepped a little closer when he took my hand, one corner of his mouth turning up.
And if you want me to, I can put Ari and Caleb on cleaning duty for a few weeks to punish them for that dreadfully botched kidnapping.
I believe you said you must return immediately. And as you recall, we were following your orders.
Just say the word, Morgan.
I think I'm good. I don't need Caleb showing up in person to complain.
What a pity. Though I also understand not wishing Caleb to show up where you are. Ever.
I'm glad we're in agreement on that.
I also have occasional regrets when he shows up to my office to complain in person. But only occasional.
He released me and turned back to Ari, who stepped forward and set his hand on Magnus's shoulder. Our eyes met once and he nodded. Then they were gone. Well, that was certainly a thing, wasn't it? Reuben, you want to order out again? I need to collapse. For a moment, I stood staring at the empty space, unsure what to do. I sat back in the chair, eyes glued to an indiscriminate point ahead of me, mind going back over what had happened. That was weird.
Looks like my system access is back. I guess they're gone.
That had really just happened. Magnus Ulrich came and laid out that kind of plan to me. Reuben sat on the corner of the sofa, giving me a worried look. I'm okay. I'm just trying to get my head around that. Do you believe everything he said? Any bad feelings? Ooh, smart. Smart to ask him about his hunches.
No bad feelings, no. I just need time to digest all that. It doesn't feel off. Surprises and all.
I think so too. Magnus sounded genuinely frustrated when discussing how his hands are tied. Though I never would have suspected that was the case.
I'd never met Ulrich until now, but Endgame is most certainly a big machine. He was being truthful about the Council's existence. The way he spoke of how agents are twisted up into everything seemed genuine as well. From what little I know of him, he was born into the organization, as he said. It's all he's known. Of course, the incident 10 years ago with the previous queen was. I recall how he disappeared from the public eye for a while. He was quite young when that happened. I believe we're the same age. Having that much responsibility so young. Remember how I talked about the way kids are raised in the academy, then naturally become agents as if it's required? That almost definitely applies to him, that guy with him, anyone else you met too. They guard Magnus zealously. You heard what he said, the way he spoke. He almost never gets to leave that place. He's too valuable. One king rank could rule this entire planet if they wanted, if they could find and take over the planetary AI. So of course other factions are eager to get their hands on one. Even more than they wanted you.
The AI? That's their worry with king ranks?
Part of Endgame's original mission was to protect the AI, you know. It's why they're still protective of the ways.
I had never thought about it like that. Reuben stood and picked up the teacup Magnus had left behind, carrying it to the kitchen. He paused halfway there and glanced back at me.
I have to take this call, sorry. Sorry, but it looks like Winter's been trying to reach me for a while now. I'll be right back.
Of course. I didn't even look up as Reuben disappeared into his study. Magnus wanted to use me as a chess piece like everyone else. That was obvious by what he said, but somehow it didn't feel as bad. Maybe because his motives were a little different. Maybe because he was using himself as one as well. Jump-starting reforms in Endgame by utilizing outside policy changes to force them to re-examine their methods. His allying with me because our goals aligned was something I hadn't expected. Magnus buying me time took the pressure off a little. A more defined goal of causing a major shift in Endgame was not that far off from what I was hoping to do anyway. Before, though, it was just a side effect to my personal goals. Now it was the main point. There was an enormity to it that eclipsed everything from before.
Ugh, I feel like this is going to throw off my entire afternoon.
That was fast.
I told him I'd call him back. He could tell something was up, though I didn't give him any details.
Sorry.
It's hardly your fault. I think we've had this discussion.
Several times.
Then let's not have it again. Why don't we get out of the house for a little and clear our heads?
Don't you have work?
It's not going anywhere.
For a moment, I felt a pang of regret that I was disrupting his life yet again, and that it would continue. Come to think of it, Magnus had suggested I stay here with Reuben a little longer, like, at his house. What did that mean for the efforts to find my own place here? And how long would that last? This was above and beyond what Reuben should have to do, though I already knew he wouldn't complain about it. I bet, with all this frustration, you'll be careful about helping random espers in the future. Though I didn't give you a choice when I materialized out of thin air.
You're not a random esper, Morgan.
I was when I first showed up. I guess it proves espers really are a danger.
Morgan.
I stood and gave him a cheeky grin. We make it impossible to focus on work. No one gets sleep because we take over your beds. Your tea vanishes because we sneak into your houses. Very dangerous. Good job, girl. You need some humor in a situation like this. An easy smile slipped over his face as he guided me toward the front door, despite that we'd only just come home a little while ago.
Some of us don't mind losing a little sleep for the right esper, or person in general.
That's a relief, because apparently I'm going to have to keep disrupting your sleep since people are still out to get me.
I am less than thrilled at the prospect of anyone being out to get you, but you can keep disrupting things for me as long as you want.
Oh ho ho! That's a dangerous offer to make.
I have it on decent authority that espers are a dangerous bunch.
You don't seem to mind.
I'm used to danger. It's in the job description.
That's good to know. I wanted to ignore the little flutter in my stomach, the way my face heated up at his teasing. Very dangerous. But after the day I'd had, maybe it wouldn't be bad to give myself the chance to enjoy something pleasant. For a little while anyway. Girl, you've earned it. We seem to have teleported to a place I haven't seen for one route. Similar architecture to a certain dome we were in before. Reuben had said he had a spot he liked to go to clear his head, and he suspected I'd like it. He was right. His spot was gorgeous. There was a canal that ran through the middle of Erida. Nearby were some industrial areas, but the view of the city was still beautiful. The way the fading sun reflected in the water, it was nice. And despite everything, we didn't talk about Magnus at all. I imagine that was intentional on his part. Anytime our conversation strayed that way, he changed the subject. I really appreciated that. He pointed across the water to a low building on the other side as we walked.
Winter lives over there, and our office is a little beyond that. There's a huge art gallery between the two. You might like it if you're interested in art.
Well, my mother is an artist, so I have a bit of an interest. What about you?
I don't feel like I know much about art, but I find places like that comfortable to be in. I suppose it's the sort of enforced quiet, the calm, and the reminder there's a beautiful world out there, beyond the things I see at work. I visit when I have time.
I always try to get out to places like that too, but the when I have time part is what's difficult. In Cisalis, I was always studying.
It's terrible to live that way before you even get out into the workforce.
That's the system there. If you want to be at the top, you make that sacrifice. I went out sometimes. I mean, sometimes just the cafes near my place, but museums and things like that when I had the chance. My parents would drag me out on trips whenever they could. There are some lovely subdomes in New Albion. I traveled on my own occasionally, too. I once went to this little dome called High Wraith, right at the edge of the Waste. A small city on the edge of the Twilight region, it is built directly into some cliffs and is known for its rock climbing and the naturalistic culture and lifestyle promoted in the city. It is non-aligned and largely self-sufficient. It's a popular vacation spot for people from more populated domes.
Oh, I've been there before. It's beautiful, isn't it?
You went there for work? Or...
No, recreation. Rock climbing, actually.
What a coinky-dink! Yes, that's why I went! The rock climbing there is so great. I went there just to learn how, and it was so much fun. I mean, I thought that having the skill might be useful for if I did go to Dione. Some of the sites there are very remote, and you never know what will come in handy. But it ended up being quite enjoyable. I've always wanted to go back.
I've been there twice, and I agree. I'd love to go again.
Sounds like you guys have a potential date spot to go to. Do you travel a lot? I mean, outside of work.
Sometimes. The truth is, when I have time to do it, I often find myself wanting to stay at home.
That's fair. When traveling is part of your job, I guess it means that being at home feels like a holiday.
Something like that. Though when I'm at home, I just get buried in my projects, so...
You need someone who will make you rest.
Yeah, well... Maybe we both do.
Thank you for the walk. It was nice to talk about... anything else other than what we probably should be talking about.
Sometimes it's good to leave other things aside for a while. We've been discussing your situation non-stop. You said it yourself. It started to consume everything. But getting out to enjoy the evening and talk about anything other than work and Espers and Endgame, I thought you needed it.
Thank you. I still can't believe they just showed up at your house like that.
I get the feeling he particularly enjoyed taking us by surprise.
Maybe he just has to find ways to entertain himself. Using other people, of course. I'm not sure how much time Magnus can buy us with this plan of his.
I suppose we just have to take what we can get. And now we are going to stop talking about it.
Yeah. Okay. But we didn't talk about much else either, and we're silent for a while after that. For a long time, we stopped to watch the water flowing past, leaning against the railing as a light breeze flowed past us. Well, damn. Hello, sir. That's a very flattering angle. As we stood there, I found myself far too preoccupied with Reuben's profile. And kept studying it, only to look away in embarrassment every time I realized I was. Only to glance back again moments later, as if unable to help myself. Ah, further away. Yep, it's a solid profile, you know? Rate that a solid 8 out of 10 profile. Every so often, he'd smile slightly, and I would wonder what he was smiling about. And finally, feeling strangely on edge from a silence between us that was at once comfortable and steeped in a feeling I couldn't quite identify, I started walking again. Reuben wordlessly caught up, walking alongside me with his hands in his pockets, and we eventually circled our way back to Reuben's building. The messages started coming in around that time, too. A message explaining how I could contact Magnus privately, with an odd aside how they got back just in time and narrowly avoided getting in trouble, none of which I asked about. Be careful, Morgan. Magnus is a sharer, and he's like, I got a friend now. There was a message explaining how to access their long-distance training. Another just to ask how I was doing and to say he had fun. Oh, sweet baby Magnus. Oh my goodness. I love that man. There was such an odd, friendly tone in all the notes. It might have just been to annoy me, but somehow I had the strange feeling that He was trying to connect in his weird way. That maybe he was lonely. I had to focus on dealing with all of those, and Reuben used that opportunity to catch up on work. And later, we cooked together in his small kitchen, then found ourselves on his sofa talking about normal things, mostly. We talked about some of his hobby cases, and more about rock climbing. We stayed until pretty late, and the only reason either of us went to bed was because I'd started to fall asleep. I had been laying my head against my arm, which was draped over the back of the sofa. I must have shut my eyes because I felt his fingers brushing my cheek. Ooh! Caught! When I opened my eyes, he froze, then gave me a sheepish smile.
Ahem. Tired.
A little, I guess.
Maybe it's time for bed. It's late.
Why is it you're always willing to work yourself to the brink of exhaustion unless you think I'm tired? Then it's suddenly time to stop?
I suppose having you here makes me seek out a better balance. Seeing you yawn makes me realize how late it is.
Does that mean you're giving me your study key to look after overnight?
Maybe. Not tonight.
Mm-hmm. I knew he'd be up working long after I went to bed. But I went anyway. I laid there for a while thinking about everything. I'd been longing for normalcy, but I was starting to get used to this. To get comfortable. To get attached. I couldn't do that, though. Not in this situation. No matter how comfortable Reuben was or how easy he made it, I had to keep reminding myself that this was temporary, and we weren't in a position for feelings to develop. Girl, you are in the only position for feelings to develop. There's, like, not a world where you're in this position and feelings do not develop, okay? Feelings didn't always care, though. I was really going to have to be careful about that going forward. But I was already doubting how successful that would be.